Educational games have a reputation for being terrible or feeling like,
How do you do, fellow kids?
the whole genre feels like it's sold for those elderly parents who finally gave up trying to stop their kids from playing video games. My parents absolutely fell into this category, and I even convinced my dad that Age of Empires 2 was educational due to the necessity of balancing the economic and military aspects. But even in the off chance an educational game is good, they age like avocados or milk left out in the sun. If you try to replay them, especially as an adult, they stink. There's an army of these with no replay value that somehow turned video games into a chore. But that's not true for all of them. Today, we discuss one of the greats, a 2015 educational puzzle adventure known primarily to 90s kids. My name is Harvey Bodega, and welcome to the review of Zoombinis. Now, the Zoombini franchise kicked off in the mid-90s with Chris Hancock and Scott Osterweil meeting at TERC, an educational nonprofit. Chris was designing a tool to help kids learn how to work with data, while Scott was hired to design graphics. They put their heads together, deciding to switch from a data focus to entertaining puzzles. By roughly 1995, they had a prototype and met with Broederbund to discuss the company coming on as the game's publisher. For those who don't recognize Broederbund, they were a huge name in the industry at the time, responsible for series like Prince of Persia, Myst, and Carmen Sandiego, but also a variety of pure educational series like Living Books, Kid Picks, and Mavis Beacon Teaches Typing. Okay, little tangent for those that remember Mavis Beacon. It turns out she's not a real person, but an invented character depicted by a model. I don't know why that blew my mind so much. Anyway, the story goes that during the meeting with Broederbund, one of the executive's daughters got a hold of the prototype and fell in love with these little blue characters. This secured the company as their publisher, but it came with two caveats. Make the game feature as much of the little blue creatures as possible, and sell it as an educational game titled The Logical Journey of the Zoombinis. The pair would agree to the terms, and The Logical Journey of the Zoombinis was released in March of 1996. I played the crap out of this game back in the day, and some of the two sequels, 2001's Zoombini Mountain Rescue and 2002's Zoombini Island Odyssey. The series would sell over 1 million copies and ingrain itself into the mind of many 90s kids, but fell into a long hiatus. However, in 2015, TERC initiated a $50,000 Kickstarter campaign to completely remake the iconic Logical Journey, reaching double that goal after just 1 month. Fully funded, the simply titled Zoombinis was released in October of 2015, and that's what we'll be playing today. The goal of this remake, however, was not necessarily for profit, as TERC would receive a $2 million research grant to teach and measure kids' computational thinking using the Zoombinis game. Okay, so this may take you by surprise, but educational theory is not my area of expertise. My areas are more random facts about World War I and the knowledge that every cover of Bruce Springsteen's 1984 hit, I'm on Fire, is less creepy than the original, but I'll do my best to explain the concept. Computational thinking, or CT, is a set of skills theoretically related to computation applied to solve complex problems, like pattern recognition, trial and error methods, breaking problems into manageable subsets, distinguishing important information from noise, and a few others. Jody Asbell Clark of TERC describes in her TEDx talk, We Know More Than We Can Tell, which I'll link in the description, that the education system relies not only on students learning a concept, but demonstrating their understanding in quizzes and tests. Where Jody points out a shortcoming with this method are with the students that struggle with demonstrating their knowledge, oftentimes more than learning the original concept. They know more than they can tell, and games not only teach computational thinking, but show teachers when students have learned skills via their gameplay. It's really fascinating talk, I encourage you to watch it, and she even name drops our boys. So Zoombinis has a surprisingly academic background, and now it's time we explore the actual game. The premise is simple, because really Zoombinis doesn't have much of a story. Your job is to guide these little creatures to their new homeland of Zoombiniville. See, they lived happily on Zoombini Isle, but signed a bad trade deal with the neighboring species called the Bloats. They promised higher trade profits, but really locked the Zoombinis into an indentured servitude. I get it, I can't blame them. I've also been a slave to the Bloats after some Taco Bell, I'll tell you what. Eventually, though, our little blue protagonists decide they've had enough of the Bloats and prepare to emigrate away from Zoombini Isle to Zoombiniville, facing puzzling challenges along the way. We'll get into each of the challenges and what happens when all Zoombinis reach their goal later in the video, but let's take a look first at presentation. The art style is fairly cartoony, with some surprisingly detailed backgrounds, selling the tone of an adventure. There are varied but consistent settings, creating a feeling of continuity but an overall sense of wonder. There is a lot more to this world, hinted at by these archaic environmental machines and different species, but you're just a passenger through it. Although the backgrounds are almost entirely static and the animation's minimal, there's an immersive quality, and the attention to detail is well worth a mention. A few small examples of this are the refractions of light on the mirror machine's prisms, Zoombini Isles Sky and Sea, the swamp of Captain Cajun's ferryboat. It's great stuff. The character models are rather minimalistic though, and can look a little goofy up against the more detailed backgrounds. But there's a reason for this we'll get into later, and I didn't think it was a big deal. I really have no complaints about the visuals. Except, okay, for those who didn't play the original, this may not mean anything to you, but I have to do a little compare and contrast. An example that stuck out to me is the Zoombini creation screen at Zoombini Isle, something I complimented in the remake. The remake is perfectly well done, but the original has this sort of gorgeous Tim Burton meets Van Gogh Starry Night pixelated aesthetic. The whole game has a slightly darker palette, making the journey feel more dangerous, and the adventure more adventurous. A minor change that I thought wasn't great was the standard open eyes of the original Zoombinis replaced with just dot eyes, but one great change is the redesign of the pizza machine. Instead of looking uncomfortably organic, the new one looks much more like a machine. I mean, ugh. You can also see why the new character models are so minimalistic. The same animations and design are taken verbatim from the original, and that's awesome. For a remake roughly 19 or so years later, I really can't complain, but I want to put my little blurb of appreciation for the original art. For anyone, playing the remake, which is optimized for modern systems with a modern resolution, is the best way to play it. No contest, and the new art style is very well done. The sound, unlike the visuals, requires very little comparison between the original and the remake, as the 2015 version mainly uses a remaster of the original soundscape. And it's damn good. Few games, especially from the 90s, feature a New Orleans influence, but Zoombinis not only features Captain Cajun and the Who's Bayou route, but jazzy overtones to the music. Tracks vary from vaguely exotic adventuring songs to something you might hear from a saxophone street performer on Bourbon Street. It's good, but primarily used for transitions between puzzles or in Zoombiniville, so it's not a huge part of the soundscape. The sound effects feature much more prevalently, like the variety of sounds unique to each puzzle, the zany language of the Zoombinis, and many more subtle sounds to bring life to the environments. It is not complex by any means, but it's well done. The only place I noticed a difference between the original and remake, besides better sound quality, is the sounds the Zoombinis make while walking or skating, bouncing, driving, or propelling. It's a bit of a bummer to see these lacking from the 2015 version, but I suspect it's because of the propeller sound effect. There's no remastering this compressed horror show. I do miss the others, especially the skating, but it's an understandable exclusion. If the remake excluded the original's voice acting, though, it would be enough for my nostalgia to not allow me to like it. Thankfully, they don't do that. I don't know if this is true for everyone, but there are some games' soundtracks and voice lines that just stick in your brain. I go into this in my Northgard video, specifically highlighting voice lines in RTS and 4X games. Both of these genres often have audio callouts with a wonderfully memorable X factor. But Zoombinis has that same beautiful, iconic quality. First of all, the narrator is excellent.
Hip hip Zombini! Fighting their fears and the occasional family of bats. My, that was challenging. The darkest, most dangerous part of the journey is yet to come.
But there are some other iconic characters like the cave guards.
The floodgates are opened, it seems. Tisk tisk. Kinda slow, ain't ya?
This one was always really memorable to me, I'm not sure why.
Bye-bye!
Hula Instantaneous.
But you always show up at closing time. What gives?
Captain Cajun.
Well, sit wherever you want to, I don't really care.
And the three pizza trolls. Yes, the stoner-sounding Shiler and the Karen-esque Willa are memorable and over-the-top goofy.
Some of those toppings are distasteful.
Pizza time!
But this man is a fucking icon. Arno the Pizza Troll's voice lines are seared into my soul.
Make me a pizza!
Something on that I don't like.
More toppings! Oh, my pizza!
Fleens? You're not Fleens.
His voice acting has that special sauce. Over the top, goofy, and incredibly memorable. A 90s icon, don't you forget it. Just don't look at how he looks in the third game.
Look how they massacred my boy.
To take the nostalgia goggles off to the greatest extent that I can, this is a very simple soundscape by today's standards, with some sections just silent. But I truly believe the voice acting and music hold up, and some of the other sounds range from good to passable to dated. Okay, we know the history of the game and have evaluated the presentation. On to the gameplay. Well, I'll cover the general mechanics, then touch on each of the 12 puzzles that the Zoombinis must face on their journey. Starting on Zoombini Isle, you can create your own Zoombinis or click the multiple dice icon to create a full set of 16 random ones. Afterward, you can click the green arrow to set forth. Each leg of the journey has 3 puzzles before reaching a resting point, where you can choose to continue if you have a full set of 16 Zoombinis, or go back to other campsites or Zoombini Isle until all 400 Zoombinis reach Zoombiniville. Oftentimes, not all of our little friends will make it through every challenge. They may get left behind, chased off by bees, sucked into a swirling void, fall down a precipice, or get bitch-slapped into the upper atmosphere. If this happens, that Zoombini will return to the previous safe zone. Where this gets interesting is the adjustable difficulty. This is not something you tweak in the settings, but every time you get 3 full sets of 16 Zoombinis through a leg of the journey, it gets harder, up to 3 times after the initial, and unlocks a new building in Zoombiniville to commemorate this achievement. You may not reach the hardest level on every leg of the journey by the end of the game, and it's very helpful to make this game fun and challenging to young kids or seasoned adults. Basically, progress through the game until all your Zoombinis make it to Zoombiniville, and you've won. I really can't leave it at that though, as the 12 puzzles make up all the gameplay. I'm going to discuss each one, then show the ending cutscene of what happens when you win. I'm considering both the puzzles and the ending cutscene spoilers. Knowing how to solve each puzzle will take a lot of the luster away of using your own computational thinking to figure out the solutions. It may spoil some puzzles completely, but others will be challenging whether you go in blind or fully informed. Jump forward to the time on screen if you'd like to avoid these. Okay, we're ready? I'll start chronologically at Zoombini Isle, and then go all the way to the end, taking a short detour for the alternative route, and I'll rank each puzzle against each other from 1 to 12 to give you an idea of which ones are the best. After leaving Zoombini Isle, the first leg of the journey is called the Good, the Bad, and the Hungry, and the first challenge is the Allergic Cliffs. This is a puzzle involving 2 rickety bridges held aloft by wooden pegs spanning the distance between 2 cliffs. The bridges are built over these 2 non-hostile animate faces in the cliff, but at each attempted crossing, one of them has a nasty allergy to different Zoombini attributes. If a Zoombini tries to cross a bridge with an attribute our cliff friend is allergic to, they sneeze and send the Zoombini back to the other side, knocking out one of the pegs holding up the bridge. If you run out of pegs, the bridges fall and the remaining Zoombinis are sent back to Zoombini Isle. An important note is that one of the cliffs is allergic, and the other simply sneezes back the Zoombinis that belong to the other side. If the top cliff is allergic to single eyes, for instance, then it'll sneeze back all single-eyed Zoombinis, while the opposing cliff will sneeze back everything but single-eyed Zoombinis. You can determine which attribute causes the allergy by trial and error, which is very easy at the first difficulty as there's only one. The second difficulty level has 2 different versions of the same attribute causing the allergy, like spring and propeller legs, while at the third difficulty level, the allergy is caused by 2 different attributes altogether, like the Fred Flintstone car legs and sunglass eyes. The final level adds a third attribute like blue noses, spring feet, and scraggly hair. The random attributes causing the allergies change on each visit, and having to discover which face has the allergy makes this puzzle varied enough to keep a level of interest. There are some frustrating shortcomings though. Firstly, maybe about 50 to 75% of the time, I didn't determine what was causing the allergies, but was able to get everyone across just by guessing. Although a level of difficulty maintains, this does hurt the challenge. It can begin to feel like brainless trial and error, especially if you're stuck on the same difficulty level for a while, and certainly by the end game. Amplifying that tedium is the inability to get through this puzzle quickly. I mean, just look how slow these animations are. Placing a Zoombini to attempt crossing a specific bridge will have a crossing animation, a potential sneeze animation, and a short delay prior to allowing the next Zoombini to attempt another crossing. Now this is probably to account for the possibility of the bridge falling while a second Zoombini is going across, traumatizing a young child with the incorrect idea that they just killed their little blue potato head, but the original did allow this. I guess I understand why they did it, but after leading hundreds of Zoombinis across this puzzle, it's just not my favorite. Additionally, the puzzle lacking any visual changes for the difficulty levels and anything goofy or iconic makes this puzzle just okay to tedious. Of the 12, I'd say this puzzle is 8th best. The next puzzle after the cliffs is the Stone Cold Caves. There are 4 stone guardians blocking 4 paths to 4 different caves. Very similarly to the Allergic Cliffs, each cave guardian has attributes that they like and those that they reject, but with 4 paths instead of just the 2. The difference is that instead of having an allergy, the guardians just don't like Zoombinis, so if a Zoombini is rejected, the guardians sort of ground pounds them back to the beginning with a shockwave. If this happens too many times, the associated path will be blocked altogether and no further attempts will be allowed. The green guardians on the left and right initially screen Zoombinis for the 2 paths on their associated sides, while the gray guardians then evaluate the Zoombinis once the green guardians have let them pass. So if a green guardian allows a Zoombini but the gray rejects it, then try the other path associated with the same green guardian. The starting difficulty has each pair of guardians rejecting or accepting one feature, like the greens are split over spring feet and the grays split over mohawks, for instance. Then, for the second and third levels, this rises to 2 attributes per pair and 3 attributes per pair for the highest difficulty. More or less, this puzzle has the same issues that the Allergic cliffs have, but a few are worse. Yes, only one slow Zoombini can attempt a path at a time, but I see less of a reason to prevent multiple Zoombinis trying paths at the same time in this puzzle. Things can feel more repetitive with no significant change between the second and third difficulties, and I never left behind a single Zoombini to this puzzle in my entire time playing the remake. You have a massive amount of tries. I only have footage of it because I forced it to happen by purposefully guessing wrong dozens of times. You don't need to crack the code if you can't fail. Spam trial and error. Although there are no visual changes on different difficulty levels and the overall scenery is a little worse than the cliffs, what this puzzle has better are the silly but surprisingly unfriendly guardians.
What goes up must roll
Each has a different
down.
personality and a large volume of different voice lines. Like the cliffs, this puzzle is okay to tedious as well, so I'd rank it 10th of 12. The third and final puzzle in The Good, the Bad, and the Hungry is Pizza Pass, home of our icon, Arno the Pizza Troll. This, in my humble opinion, is the most memorable puzzle in Zoombinis, and your goal is simple. Make Arno the pizza he wants, but he isn't going to tell you what he wants on it. Cook pizzas for him with the pizza machine, and he'll either toss it into the rejection pit for having something that he doesn't like, throw the pizza on a stone and demand more toppings if he likes what he sees but wants more, or, finally, accept the perfect pizza and let the Zoombinis pass. If you present too many incorrect pizzas, Arno will slap the Zoombini that delivered the pizza so hard that they fly all the way back to Zoombini Isle. Unlike the previous 2 puzzles, each difficulty level comes with substantial mechanical and visual changes. The first just has Arno with a few pizza machine topping options, while the second level welcomes Willa and has each pizza being served with an ice cream sundae. Before being allowed to pass, you have to present both pizza trolls with their desired pizza and sundae, and although what they want changes every time, they won't ever want the same toppings. The third level welcomes Shyler, a third troll, and the final difficulty level adds more toppings that the trolls may want. This puzzle is simple, fun, and lighthearted, with goofy but hostile characters, funny voice acting, and a silly concept. The significant changes with each difficulty level mostly keeps things interesting, and I remember being stumped a fair number of times as a very young person playing the original. That being said, as an adult, it's very easy, as there's a surefire methodology to get all Zoombinis past this puzzle every time, at most earning one Zoombini a warning slap. I won't spoil it, as it can make this puzzle tedious, the same repetitive task and slow animation problem, but I think it's fantastic for a kid, depending on their age. Not only does it feature pizza and ice cream, which is almost every 7-year-old's dream diet, but if you don't know the surefire method, this puzzle can be a great deductive challenge. In trying to be objective as possible, Pizza Pass takes 3rd place. This completes the Good, the Bad, and the Hungry puzzles, and your group of Zoombinis arrive at Shelter Rock. This is a safe place to house your travelers, with rooms the size of my college dorm. If you're ready to press on with a full set, you can either go through the Deep Dark Forest or the Who's Bayou, each offering a different set of 3 puzzles before reaching the Shade Tree. I'll start with the Who's Bayou and circle back to the Deep Dark Forest after we complete this leg. Starting across Who's Bayou has us first coming across Captain Cajun's Ferryboat. This is a puzzle with a super simple premise that gets surprisingly complex. Captain Cajun is happy to help our little friends across the river, but is as intense about seating arrangements as your average wedding planner or elementary school teacher. Each Zoombini can only sit next to others that have something in common with them, so I guess more like the planner than the teacher. If you try to place a Zoombini next to another with no common attributes, Captain Cajun will use his patented ejection seat technology to send that Zoombini up to the stratosphere, and it'll struggle back to the dock. Although he's a real stickler, he seems to be a pretty good-natured Cajun frogman. He'll never get frustrated and just take off or penalize you for too many mistakes, so trial and error as much as you like. This puzzle goes on as long as you let it. You can hit the green arrow to continue at any time, leaving behind all Zoombinis not on the ferryboat. Difficulty levels simply change the orientation of the seats, as on the first level, Zoombinis will have to share attributes with at most 2 neighbors. The second raises at the 3, then 4 in the third level, and the hardest and final level requiring some Zoombinis to match with 6 neighbors. This orientation doesn't change depending on which Zoombinis you brought with you, so it is possible for it to be impossible to get every Zoombini on the boat, although it's very uncommon. It's rare enough that this might be one of the longest puzzles, as if you're anything like me, you'll try 100 different orientations to try to get everyone on the boat, or make sure it's impossible if it is. I found this engaging as an adult and did as a kid as well. It's worth noting that there is a way to make this puzzle much easier, and it's a problem that other puzzles that focus on Zoombini attributes face as well. You're allowed to create your own set of Zoombinis, so if you want to cheese your way through, you can make an entire set with all spring feet, or all with the same nose, or whatever. However, once a Zoombini is created, you're stuck with it, so you won't have 100% control over which Zoombinis that you take with you every time. Additionally, there are enough puzzles that aren't attribute-based that still present a challenge. Just using that method can make this specific puzzle incredibly easy. If you're playing as an adult, I recommend just using the Randomize All button at Zoombini Isle. Come on guys, it's about the logical journey, not the logical destination. Anyway, with that issue aside, Captain Cajun's Ferryboat is one of the best puzzles, with a fun, over-the-top character with funny voice lines, and a healthy challenge for all ages. This puzzle takes second place. Next in Whose Bayou is the Titanic Tattooed Toads, which is a puzzle involving a river covered by a neat grid of lily pads. Unfortunately, Captain Cajun isn't here to help us across this one, and the Zoombinis have to rely on the friendly Titanic Tattooed Toads to carry them across. These giant amphibians carry one Zoombini at a time and only hop on lily pads that correspond with the designs on their backs. Who tattoos these toads in the botany of these weird, bizarre lily pads, we may never know. If there is a whole line of the same lily pad shape, color, or design, then simply select the toad with that design, and it'll carry one Zoombini across at a time. Each toad only making a maximum of 2 trips across before leaving. If you select a path that doesn't go all the way, the toad and their Zoombini passenger will hop around aimlessly, unable to make the opposite side until you select the green arrow to carry on and leave them behind. The second difficulty level welcomes Bruno the Shape Swapper, a goofy-looking fairy creature who swaps lily pads around. After swapping a few, he drops his swapping wand and leaves, allowing you to use it to switch lily pads. This has a limited number of uses, and most trips will require you using the wand extensively to get every Zoombini safely across. The third difficulty level brings lily pad crabs, frustrating little creatures that climb out of the water and walk around on lily pads that match the design on their backs. These continue to appear at a set frequency and block the paths of your Titanic toads. The last and hardest difficulty level maintains all the same mechanics, but has fewer charges of Bruno's magic wand. This puzzle is an adequately challenging puzzle for all ages, but has a few frustrations associated with it. Firstly, it's really easy to make a silly mistake in tracking lily pad components across the river, especially lily pad shape. So the beginning of the puzzle always has me looking very closely at various paths, making sure each toad can make it all the way. That's fine for level 1 and 2, but this is the only puzzle in the whole game that has a timed component. The longer you wait, the more crabs appear. This definitely creates more of a challenge to find paths quickly or create them with the wand, but this can get frustrating as the toads hop very slowly. Unlike other puzzles, you can have multiple toads hopping at a time, but they can also block each other. So at the beginning of the puzzle in level 3 or 4, if you don't notice a path at the top of the lily pad grid prior to crabs completely blocking it, you have to find another way. I'll say it's consistently a great challenge with no way to cheese your way through, but I find it can get frustrating with how slowly the toads move and how easy it is to make a silly mistake. Presentation-wise, the toads and wand have great sound effects and it's a fun idea and design, although less striking and iconic as some of the others. I gave the toads 9th place. The last puzzle in Whose Bayou is Stone Rise, a dried-up river with an enigmatic machine. This challenge has a lot in common with Captain Cajun's Ferryboat, as you need to place Zoombinis on the powered hex grid where they have the shown attribute in common with their neighbor. Plus, power starts from the right side where the cliff is, so if an attribute matches incorrect closer to the power source, even if it matches subsequently, power won't reach that area. Basically, try to get it right from right to left. The difficulty levels are very similar to the Ferryboat, where the complexity of the grid increases with each difficulty level up to this crazy flower-like shape. Stone Rise has a lot of what is great about Captain Cajun's Ferryboat, while avoiding a few of the problems. Like that puzzle, Stone Rise only ends when you select the green arrow to carry on, so you can impatiently move along at the expense of leaving some of the Zoombinis behind, or meticulously make sure you get it perfectly before moving on. Although it's pretty rare for Captain Cajun's Ferryboat to be impossible to get all 16 on the boat, Stone Rise avoids this problem by having each puzzle change based on the current set of Zoombinis, although this makes Stone Rise much easier than the Ferryboat. It does prevent cheesing your way through with all Zoombinis that share one attribute by randomizing which attributes you have to pair, but this shouldn't be a problem if you aren't taking the easy road, you freeloader. The mechanics are well done, and almost the exact same puzzle appears in the sequel, Zoombini Mountain Rescue, although, for older kids and adults, the first and second difficulty levels will likely be much too easy. On the presentation side, it's hard to compete with Captain Cajun's goofy antics,
My, y'all cuter than a pot of black-eyed peas!
but is one of the locations in this game that contributes well to the sense of wonder about the world of Zoombinis. Why and how is this here? It almost feels like some sort of ancient advanced civilization built this, but disappeared long ago. It's cool and sparks the imagination, but is a little less visually stunning and memorable than some of the other puzzles. This one was hard to place, but it ended up in 7th. This completes Who's Bayou and gets a current set of Zoombinis to the next safe area, the Shade Tree. Before moving on to the Mountains of Despair, which holds the final 3 puzzles before Zoombiniville, let's jump back to the alternative route of the Deep Dark Forest. The first challenge this ominous route offers us is Fleens! There's an exclamation mark in the name. This brings our intrepid little Smurf things into a clearing where some unfriendly Fleens are hanging out, mostly on a craggy rock, but 3 on a tree branch with a bee's nest hanging from it. The Fleens will chase our friends if they see them, but in a very particular way. Like Zoombinis, Fleens have 4 attributes: eyes, noses, hair, and feet, with 5 variations of each. They will chase Zoombinis with attributes that correspond to their own. In order to get by, you need to present the Zoombinis that relate to the 3 Fleens on the tree branch. This will bait them into jumping off the branch to chase Zoombinis up the tree. However, if all 3 are lured into jumping off the branch, the jostling will anger the bees enough to chase the Fleens off and allow the remaining Zoombinis to carry on. When being chased by the Fleens, Zoombinis run for safety up another branch of the tree, which can fit up to 6. If a 7th one tries to fit, the last one falls off and is chased back to Shelter Rock. This continues until all Zoombinis are sent back, or the Fleens are chased off by the bees. Difficulty levels have no visual changes, but significant mechanical ones, as which Fleen relates to which Zoombini can vary greatly. On the easiest level, the relationship attributes are consistent, like hair of each species is related to the other's hair, feet to feet, eyes to eyes, and nose to nose, and doesn't change upon each visit. On the next difficulty level, the correlations will change each time, such as the pink mohawk Fleens may chase the ponytail Zoombinis this time, but chase those with the Charlie Brown hair tuft next time. On the 3rd level, 3 of the 4 attributes are shuffled, with 1 still lining up, so it may be noses to noses, but feet to eyes, eyes to hair, and hair to feet. The final difficulty has all attributes shuffled and always random. These 3rd and 4th levels present a good challenge for those of all ages and really benefits from getting out the old pad of paper and counting the attributes. This puzzle can punish you if you try the trick of having multiple of the exact same Zoombini too, as one can appear on the tree branch while the other is on the rock, and it's a blind guess as to which belongs to which Zoombini. This puzzle does share the problem of having repetitive and fairly slow animations with the cliffs and the caves, but there are only a few per visit. The Fleens are also fun and chaotic, with some hard rock music when they're chasing, so the puzzle mechanics and presentation are pretty fun. As for the ranking, I ended up placing Fleens in 6th. Next is Hotel Dimensia, like Dimension, owned by Ula Instantaneous, the sort of raccoon lady. This is a safe place to spend the night, but Ula only accepts Zoombinis in rooms according to their attributes, and that parameter changes each time. If you attempt to put a Zoombini where it doesn't belong, the room's platform cuts away shortly, dropping them back to the forced floor and jostling Ula's clock forward. See, Ula will only work until closing time, which is fair. Maybe she's in a tree hotel operator union or something. So if the clock gets jostled forward too many times, she'll close up and send the remaining Zoombinis not in rooms back to Shelter Rock. On the easiest difficulty level, there are 5 rooms and 1 attribute used to determine who sleeps in which room. So if its nose is this visit, all that have the same nose sleep in the same room. On the second difficulty, there's a 5x5 grid, where rows and columns have different attributes. Columns may be feet, while rows may be eyes, so only Zoombinis that share the same feet and eyes can share the same room. You're not told which attribute that is, so discovering that is trial and error. The third difficulty has the same layout, but some rooms are boarded up. Your goal is to figure out which attributes establish the grid, ideally avoiding where a combination of attributes means for a Zoombini to sleep in a boarded up room, therefore being left behind. You cannot take Zoombinis out of rooms once they're inside, so this can easily happen without careful planning. On the last and hardest difficulty, only Zoombinis that share 3 attributes can share a room. So let's say columns break up Zoombinis by noses, rows break them up by hair, and the set of 5 in each intersection of the grid is broken up by eyes. This is another puzzle where higher difficulties are much more engaging and fun, while the low levels may be best for kids and tedious for adults and older kids. I always found the third level to be incredibly difficult, and it's surprising to see a puzzle in this game add something to the difficulty with the boarded up aspect, only to take it away for the final difficulty. Maybe if the easiest difficulty was removed, and the second difficulty 5x5 grid was the easiest, and the final level was the 3 attribute grid also with boarded up rooms? I'm not sure, but the overall mechanics are engaging and fun. Visuals are pretty decent, thematically well done, although not necessarily the most exciting of backdrops. Ula, to her benefit and detriment, is one of the few friendly characters in the game, so this may make her stick out less than some of her more over-the-top and hostile counterparts. Mechanically a good puzzle, no tedium waiting for animations, and higher difficulties are suitably tough. So I'd say Hotel Dimensia falls overall in 4th place. The last stop in the Deep Dark Forest before reaching the Shade Tree is the Mudball Wall, a strange machine that fires balls of different colored mud with shapes on them up against a wall with a grid. In order to get up the wall, the Zoombinis have to shoot the mud ball with the necessary color and shape to hit a grid location with 1 to 3 dots. This catapults the number of Zoombinis associated with the number of dots up and on top of the wall. To determine which color and shape fires to which grid location is determined by patterns and combinations of mud ball color and shape. One row may be for green mud, while one column may be for star shapes, and so on. On the first level, the patterns of which color and shape hit where are always in lines, where the second can be in diagonals. The third includes a much more complicated grid, as there is now the color of the shape itself to worry about. In the final difficulty, the more complex grid layout remains, but patterns can now be in diagonals or just more complex. You can keep firing mud until you run out, then all remaining Zoombinis have to go back to Shelter Rock. This puzzle has a lot of the same type of thinking as the hotel, but separated from Zoombini attributes. I never found myself leaving very many Zoombinis behind on this one, but if you're not paying close enough attention on your mud levels, you may leave a few behind. I like the mechanics of this one, and it marks the 4th puzzle to not be associated with Zoombini attributes, which I appreciate. It does have slow animations though, like if you hit a spot with 3 dots, instead of catapulting all 3 Zoombinis up at once, it does one at a time. There's some tedium here, but less than some of the earlier puzzles. As for the look of the Mudball wall, just like the Stone Rise puzzle, the story behind this bizarre machinery, its origin and intended purpose, is never really explained, creating more of a sense of wonder regarding this world's lore and history. I think it's visually pretty neat, too. My one sort of critique is that I would have liked to see the Stone Rise puzzle and this one swapped, as Captain Cajun deals with very similar mechanics as Stone Rise, where Hotel Dimensia has a very similar functional layout and way of thinking as Mudball Wall. But on the other hand, then all 3 of the Deep Dark Forest puzzles would be attribute-based, so maybe it's best that this doesn't happen. That being said, I think Mudball Wall earns 5th place overall. This completes our alternative routes, takes us to the safety of the Shade Tree, then onward to the final 3 puzzles prior to Zoombiniville, lying in the Mountains of Despair. In this final leg of the journey, the first challenge to overcome is the Lion's Lair. This lion is some sort of animate statue, guarding the path by blocking it by a boulder. The only way the Zoombinis can pass is by arranging themselves in order by the lion's requirements. This may be noses, feet, etc., but once all Zoombinis are in order as required by his parameters, he lets them through. If one is placed in the wrong spot, it's quickly relocated to where it's meant to be, but knocks a peg out that's holding up the gate to the puzzle. Reminiscent of the Allergic cliffs, if all pegs fall out, the gate drops and the remaining Zoombinis have to return to the Shade Tree. On the easiest difficulty, the order is just given to you, like the specific order of hairstyles or types of feet. On the second difficulty, the order is given, missing a few attributes. On the third, you have to place Zoombinis in order based on one attribute, but within the breakdown of that attribute, they have to be organized based on another. So if red noses go first, then blue, but the second row has a breakdown by feet starting with propellers, then springs, etc., then the first would have to be a red nose Zoombini with propellers, then red nose with springs, then blue nose with propellers, and so on. Then, at the final difficulty level, the symbols to guide you are just removed altogether. This puzzle is laughably easy on the first 2 levels, especially because your Zoombinis placed in the wrong spot are relocated to where they're supposed to be. Honestly, I think I remember super young me thinking that the first level was too easy too. The hardest level is actually fun though, but for issues that we'll get into later, outside of the practice mode, you're unlikely to get there on very many playthroughs. There is an initial sense of wonder at the presentation though. It feels like a scene out of Greek mythology or something you'd see in Tomb Raider, but I'll admit that effect wore off for both young and adult me, especially with no iconic characters or significant changes to the visuals. I will say that the new art is much better than the original, and this puzzle seemed to have been popular enough for the exact same mechanics to be brought back in the sequel, just this time with turtles. I'd say this would have been much better with the second difficulty level being the first, with adding a 4th and hardest difficulty level like a 3rd attribute to organize by. Overall, this is not a terrible puzzle, but it ends up in 11th place when ranked against its peers. Next is our second puzzle in the Mountains of Despair, but second last puzzle in the game, the Mirror Machine. Our little friends come across some sort of pulley and prism system which only allows Zoombinis to pass if they match their likeness with the opposite side of the prism. On the first difficulty, you simply match Zoombinis to their likenesses on prisms being shown, then activate the lever. The light will shine through, and if correct, the Zoombini will pass through without issue. If incorrect, their crystal will lower and knock the Zoombini off its little minecart thing down a precipice, sending it back to the Shade Tree. On the second difficulty, you have to add filters, so although the opposite Zoombini likeness and the one in question may not match, you can trick the prism into letting them pass with these filters. This is made more difficult on the third level with what's called blinking attribute filters that change depending on what other filters they're with and what side they're on. You can also no longer select which Zoombini to put through as they come through in a specific order. The hardest difficulty level involves the same mechanics, but sending through 2 at a time, requiring the filters to accommodate both Zoombini attributes. The puzzle continues until the green arrow is pressed to proceed, which can be done at any time once at least one Zoombini is through, or once all Zoombinis have been sent back or made it across. So that's a simplified explanation of this puzzle, and I hate it. As much as I like this game, I hate this puzzle so much. It's terrible, and I'll tell you why. The animations are languidly slow. The light passing through the prism, the Zoombini attempting its crossing, and you have to pull the lever again to reset for the next Zoombini. Of course, you have to do all 16 one at a time until the hardest difficulty. The first difficulty level is a matching game, best designed for incredibly young kids, too simple for most who would be playing this game, like the first level of the Lion's Lair. The next level is also incredibly easy, but due to the boringly slow pace, it's very easy to make a stupid mistake out of impatience. The third level introduces what's called blinking attributes, and they change at a predetermined but frustratingly obtuse way.
How can you be so obtuse?
Here's a graph on what they'll change to based on the last layer of that attribute category. I'll be honest, I never knew that until this research, as I thought they just changed randomly. This is the second last puzzle too, and all 400 Zoombinis will have to pass through this damn thing. The final level gets a little better, but still with the horrible animation speed, despite 2 at a time instead of 1, and with the nonsensical blinking attribute prisms. Although I gave the Lion's Lair 11th place, I made sure to mention that it isn't outright bad, but I will say that about the Mirror Machine. I will say the sound design is good, but the wonder will wear off incredibly quickly due to the terrible pacing and mechanics. What's frustrating is that other than the first level and blinking prisms, the puzzle isn't bad at its core. How it functions is bad, and I feel like I could come up with different ways to redeem the puzzle mechanics by not making it so horrendously slow. Unsurprisingly, I'm going to give the Mirror Machine 12th place. If you haven't aged substantially or gone insane in the Mirror Machine, which may be the actual puzzle there, you've made it through what I consider to be the 2 worst puzzles in the game. Will this challenge make up for the overly easy or tediously slow slog of the previous 2? Well, Bubblewonder Abyss is an 80s music video or vaporwave grid with various arrows and icons spread over a mystic-looking chasm, and the Zoombinis need to make it across by floating in a bubble. The paths they take are so determined by the arrows and icons in the grid that redirects the floating Zoombini's trajectory either by the direction of just plain arrows or in the direction of arrows if the Zoombini has the attribute pictured in its icon. Watch out though, as pick an incorrect route and your little friend may be sucked into a swirling void, which thankfully instead of sending them through time or breaking them down on a molecular level, it just plops them back at the shade tree. I won't cover every change that each difficulty level brings, but the complexity gets much higher with each one. Arrows that switch back and forth every other Zoombini, colored switches that change other arrows, and 2 starting trajectories instead of just 1 on many of them. At higher difficulty, this puzzle goes beyond just sending the right Zoombini on the right path, but also on which path in which order. Mechanically, it's engaging, suitably difficult, and really brings a wonderful sense of accomplishment for getting everyone through. The visuals and sound design are great too, with the Zoombinis looking cute and silly blowing up bubbles to use as vehicles. But also, you'll learn to associate this twinkling sound with dread, as you've lost another to the void. No, not that void. However, this puzzle has one problem. After slogging through the previous 2 puzzles and getting to this really engaging one, the last puzzle before Zoombiniville, you're raring to go and use your brain head to think good. That being said, I said it matters what direction and what order you send your Zoombinis in, but it also matters when you do it as well. If 2 bubbles bump into one another, they both pop, sending both their occupants down the chasm and back to the shade tree. Getting so impatient in the previous puzzles and wanting to push through to the end, I would consistently, as a youth and adult, send Zoombinis too quickly and lead to several popping. This, besides making silly mistakes in the Mirror Machine, is why you're unlikely to see the hardest levels of these puzzles without being very deliberate. It's easy to make silly mistakes. That being said, this exact puzzle is in the sequel with a few more mechanics, including using Zoombinis bumping into each other for puzzle purposes, magnets, and a variety of other things to make it even better. Although this can get very frustrating, I view this as more of a me problem than the game's problem. But maybe if this puzzle appeared after more engaging and less tedious puzzles, there would be less impatience. Despite my complaints, I think this is the best puzzle in the game, taking first place. And thank goodness, because the 11th and 12th best puzzle were the first 2 in the Mountains of Despair. There it is. We've covered all the puzzles and got a set of Zoombinis to Zoombiniville. If you play perfectly, it will take you 25 trips to get all 400 to the end. Once you get everyone home, you're rewarded with this pop-up and voiceover.
Well done! You did it! You saved them all!
Yes, it's incredibly simple, but I meant it when I said that this game is actually about the journey over the victory, and I never think I fully beat this game as a kid. I mean, the academic design for this game is to play it in a classroom setting, so you won't be able to put in the potentially dozens of hours to see this thing through. So with that, we've finished the story, and welcomed back our spoiler avoiders. This is an incredibly nostalgic game for me, and for those who learned about each puzzle will now know, there are puzzles in here that will be engaging and challenging for people of all ages. It's like the recommended ages on a Lego box, 4 to 99, and that's saying a lot for a puzzle game, especially an educationally oriented one. I know this game isn't for everyone, but if you like puzzle games and don't mind a slow pace, you're likely to really enjoy this. Like I said in my Garage Bad Dream Adventure video, I feel like a slow-paced 90s adventure game works well for translation onto mobile devices, and I definitely think Zoombinis fits that category. Other than that though, Garage is nothing like Zoombinis. That game is about a creature that looks like a combination of biological and mechanical attributes, trying to escape out of a world by solving puzzles, for characters that are always in the same place. Anyway, if you have kids, young siblings, or are a teacher, this game may provide a lot of fun for both yourself and young people. TERC seems to have the ability to download the game for free if it's for educational purposes too, but for everyone else, it's available on Steam and on mobile device app stores. I know this video was a particularly long one, so thank you for sticking it through with me, trying a bit more of an extended essay style here. I hope you enjoyed it. My name is Harvey Bodega, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks a lot.
Ah, you've done just great for today. Relax, turn off the computer, go get some fresh air.